And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a returning good brother to the temple, coming to us from Elflair Games, previously on with Wasted Lands: The Dreaming Age, and briefly touching upon Night Shift. Now coming back with the third entry in the Powered by Ogres series with 13 Parsecs, Adventures Beyond the Solar Frontier, which congratulations on getting that funded in less than 4 hours.
Thank
The
you.
one and only Jason Vey. How you doing today, man?
Good, good. Thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
I mean, yeah, I could have brought up Chutzpah and a couple others, but I wanted to focus on ogres for this.
Sure, but I will say that Chutzpah is going to be, which is the CD8 system, that's going to be coming back pretty soon because after 13 Parsecs, I'm working on a new neo-noir game using the CD8 system. So you're going to see that kind of expanded and taken a little more seriously in the near future.
Fair enough. So, I think the last time that I had you on, you talked about wanting to build a trilogy of genres out of ogres, since first was Night Shift,
Mhm.
which was a urban horror affair.
Mhm.
Then there was Wasted Lands, which was high fantasy, but high fantasy in the you're creating the mythos, sword and sorcery
I
kind of
would
approach.
I would actually call it more, gritty swords and sorcery than high fantasy.
Hmm.
To me, high fantasy evokes more Lord of the Rings and Forgotten Realms, whereas Wasted Lands is much more Conan and H.P.
Yeah.
Lovecraft. So it's I would call it more swords and sorcery. But yes, it's our fantasy game.
Hmm. And now venturing into space opera with 13 parsecs. So, was it always the plan to tackle those three genres when Ogres was being developed?
I would say very quickly after we started developing it. Ogres came about because of Night Shift. I had and I've told this story a number of times. I'm not sure if I ever told it on your podcast or not, but
You
uh,
might have, but I'm not going to go back and look.
right. um, I had done a blog on how to use original Dungeons and Dragons to run a Buffy the Vampire Slayer game. I'm a big fan of old school playstyle. I think a lot of people that turn their noses up at it don't understand it. They think that it's arcane and complicated, and it's really not. And you can use those three little brown books to run just about anything. So I've done blogs showing people how you can do this and that and the other thing. And Tim Brannon, my co-author on Night Shift, messaged me on Facebook the next day and said, and now Tim and I work together uh, in our Eden Studios days. We both worked on the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer role-playing game. Um, so he messaged me and said, "What, dude? Why aren't we writing this game? We have to write this game. Nobody can do this game like we can. Like you have this great idea. We have to do it." So to make a long story short, he kind of put an earworm in my ear, and I wasn't looking to jump into a new project, but he knew that by suggesting it, I would mess around with it, and I did. I wrote half the system in like a week, and emailed him or messaged him back and said, "All right, well, if we're going to do this, let's do it right." Well, I've had Elflair Games kicking around sort of as a doing business as, side project for a while, but I will formally incorporate the company. We're going to do a Kickstarter. We're going to do a traditional publishing. We're going to really do it properly. And he said, "Great, let's do it." So that's kind of how Night Shift came about and how Elflair Games was born as a proper company. Um,
Hmm.
Not long after that, the Kickstarter did okay. It funded, which was really exciting for us at the time. And I said, "All right, well, now we got this company and we have to make something of it." So I want to do all the genres. And I said, "We have modern with Night Shift, and it can do any type of modern gaming you want. So next, we have to have a fantasy game. If you're going to have a gaming company that People are going to recognize you got to have a fantasy game.
Hmm.
So we're going to do fantasy, and then if we're doing modern and fantasy, we got to do science fiction, and then we'll have all three core genres and styles of play represented, and people can come to the ogres to do any type of game they want.
Yeah.
Um, so that's pretty much how the trilogy concept came about.
Hmm. Now, science fiction is a wide net,
Yes.
and because of that, it's important to narrow things down a little bit. If you end up saying, we can do the core book is built for any kind of science fiction," you end up in a situation like like what happened with Alternity, where it's just going all over the place. I love Alternity to death, but it can get a bit sprawling.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so with that in mind, what sort of science fiction are you specifically leaning for? I know I mentioned space opera earlier, but what would be some of the other media that 13 Parsecs is kind of drawing upon?
See, that's the thing. We are shooting for the moon. We're looking to give you the toolkit that will let you build whatever type of sci-fi game you want.
Hmm.
Whether it's cyberpunk, whether it's hard science fiction, whether it's uh, space opera, whether it's post-apocalypse, whether it's four-color superheroes, we're looking to give you the tools with this game to do all of that,
Hmm.
any or all of that. Now, and if anybody that's seen our prior games knows that the ogre's system is, while it's rooted in that old school white box, three little brown books style of play and rules, it's so extremely flexible and customizable that the whole point of it is that you're building the game that you want to play without putting tons of work and effort in. Excuse me, work and effort into it.
Hmm.
Um, so we have rules in here for cybernetics, for superpowers, for battle mechs, for we're super excited about our starship system, which covers everything from tiny little shuttlecraft to battle mechs to space stations.
Hmm.
Um, we have uh, discussions in there because extra rules aren't really needed, but you can cross it over with Night Shift to do an X-Files type
Yeah.
game, for example. You could cross it over with Wasted Lands to do John Carter of Mars. Um, you can just by mixing and matching what's available with these games, it really blows open
Hmm.
the the horizons of what you can do.
Yeah. Now, given that, and since you brought up starships, that's one thing I'd want to tackle. Since something that's naturally going to carry over with the concept of starships is the idea of starship combat, and
Mm-hmm.
this has been tackled by plenty of games with varying degrees of success. Some getting it more than others. But in terms of the fantasy of the party having that one ship,
Mm-hmm.
how in ogres would you tackle that while still allowing everybody to on some level contribute?
So the way we did it, and this actually came out of a discussion I had with my Friday gaming group when I told them we were working on this. I was working on this game, and they're sci-fi guys, and I said to them, okay, so what is it that you guys want to see in a science fiction RPG that you haven't seen before, that you think should be there and that people generally don't do? I'm not going to say nobody's ever done this because that would be very arrogant. I haven't seen every sci-fi game out there, and somebody's bound to come along and go, "You're not the first." So just that what's out there that you haven't seen a lot, or that you guys personally haven't seen that you want to see me tackle.
Hmm.
Um, and immediately, my GM at that table said, "Space is freaking terrifying." He said, and even in a space opera game, nobody really, like you see space horror games where people tackle that, but like you could be in cryo sleep and life support goes down on your ship, or a bulkhead blows, or like traveling from world to world could be fraught with danger, even in a heroics type game, and nobody ever really talks about that. So it got me thinking, and I came up with this idea of what are the elements of a starship? What are the systems or uh, features that all starships or all space structures have in common. And I came up with 11 structures. And I deliberately chose 11 because 11 is the range of possibilities on 2d6.
Mm-hmm.
So when you need to make a random roll for something to hit one of your starship systems, you're going to roll 2d6 to see which system it hit. And those systems are things like, I don't have my files open, so I'm just going to go off the top of my head and I'll miss a bunch. But it's things like computers and engineering and structure and weapon systems and defensive systems and engines. And I'm forgetting like 5 of them, but
Mm-hmm.
you get the idea. It's those sorts of like structural things, and each one has a rating, which can be anywhere from 1 to 10 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
When something happens to the ship, when it takes damage, or when something goes bad, each of those systems can, in its turn, take damage, which reduces its rating.
Mm-hmm.
You might not know that a system is going. Life support is another system. For example, you might not know that there's an issue with life support until it goes bad, until it hits 0 points and goes bad, and you suddenly get alarms going off and you realize that you're losing air.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the fear of space comes in. Um, if you're not monitoring things all the time, things can just go bad. Now, what those numbers mean, besides uh, vitality points, or which we call them, or hit points, is you get to add the ratings of those systems to appropriate rolls. So anytime your engineer is making a roll with the ships to repair the ship, he's going to add the ship's engineering rating,
Mm-hmm.
which represents the facilities he has at his disposal to affect engineering repairs and tweaks and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and of course, as the systems takes damage, it becomes less reliable and less helpful. So you're adding, lower and lower numbers.
Mm-hmm.
When your characters are all crewing a ship, then, and you get into starship combat, it's kind of left to the players. So the GM will go, okay, engineering, what are you doing to help out in this situation? And the engineer comes up like, I'm rejiggering the engines so that we get a sudden boost of speed that moves us from here to here. Okay, that's good. Make your check. And he makes his check, and then he gets to take that engineering and tell the the person on defense, okay, you can add the engineering score to your defense roll this round. So it goes like that, and everybody goes around, and whatever station they're monitoring, they can come up with a way that they can help out with that station and add that station's value to offense or defense or a maneuver or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how everybody gets to be involved with the ship. And then when the ship takes damage, it'll take damage to its structural points, its vitality points, but then it can also take damage to those systems
Yeah.
at the same time. So systems can blow out on you and need repaired or quick fixes or what have you. So it creates kind of a really dynamic, it still plays very fast, but it creates a very dynamic, exciting, and even tense-filled situation as everybody's trying to figure out how to use their systems to the ship's advantage and what happens when your system blows out, and the whole 9 yards. And
Mm-hmm.
again, if you really want to get gritty, um, a random encounter with a solar flare while your crew is in cryo sleep can blow a system and cause a whole mess that you wake up to horror when you when you come out of cryo. Now, hopefully, a GM's not just going to kill his characters while they're in cryo sleep,
Mm-hmm.
but it could create a horrific situation when you get woken up because something blew out. So I hope that doesn't come off as too complex. I get really passionate about this, and I just want to
Mm-hmm.
dive into like
Yeah.
how it all works. Um,
Yeah.
but and then we also have the simplified combat rules, which are also very dynamic for dogfighting. If you're just flying a fighter against another fighter, we have dogfight rules in there
Mm-hmm.
that have combat maneuvers like juking for position and barrel rolls and things like that. So
Yes. Yes.
uh,
Do a barrel roll. Sorry,
yeah,
I'm legally required to make that joke. Um, especially since I've been I recently acquired a game called Flying Circus, which is all about World War I dogfighting. You know,
I actually,
the early insane days of aviation.
when I was putting together the dogfighting rules for this, and again, they're more obviously they're more space opera than anything because
Hmm.
you don't have drag, you don't have, you know, wind resistance and all that in outer space. I guess unless you're flying in a nebula, theoretically you might, but
That's
um,
getting into the weeds.
right, exactly. So the dogfighting rules are very cinematic and they're very Star Wars.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, we
but
already tackled Star Trek with the different parts of the ship. I'm surprised you didn't go
well,
do a
and that's the
spotty
things,
Scotty impression.
and that's the thing though. So even those single uh, pilot starfighters have the exact same 11 statistics as any other spaceship.
Hmm.
So they can also take damage to their engines or their life support if they have it. Some fighters might not have life support. You might be in a spacesuit.
Hmm.
Um, but their computer systems, their, you know, what have you. So it still all plays in the same system. Those same rules apply to every structure that you might have in outer space combat, from
Hmm.
again from a small snub fighter to Robotech Veritech fighter to a space station like Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
They all have the same 11 systems and they all work on the same basic rules. So it really lets you scale, you know, the entire gamut of ships and structure.
Yeah. Now, since we've kind of gone on that, uh, this is where I'd like to veer a little bit into FTL travel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with 13 parsecs, which form of FTL travel would you lean into? Is it a case where where it requires certain jump lanes? Is it a case where you're jumping into a parallel form of space? Um,
It's going to depend on your setting.
mhm.
The nice thing about FTL travel is that um, the ship rules cover anything that can happen during your journey. The method of FTL travel doesn't really need rule.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about a number of different quote unquote real world theories of FTL travel in the GM section, from the Albuquerque
Yeah.
warp drive to jump gates to wormholes to,
To
you
the
know,
rule to the 7 day rule that say Traveler has.
yeah, we'll talk about a bunch of different types of and examples of FTL travel and hypersleep, that where
Hmm.
you might not have FTL travel, you
Yeah.
might be asleep for years and years and years, or both.
Hmm.
The Aliens RPG does a great thing where it talks about how they have FTL travel, but they still have to do hypersleep because they go mad if they stay awake during faster than light travel, which is a neat idea. Now,
Hmm.
obviously, we're not going to be ripping. I don't have the rights to Aliens, so we're not going to be using their IP.
You would not be
But
the first or the last to do a legally distinct xenomorph.
yeah, exactly. There will be a in space, no one hears you scream type mini setting included in there. I'm pretty sure that Derek is doing a military sci-fi with horror. So we
Yeah.
have four guys working on mini settings. So if you've seen Night Shift, you know we have like several mini settings in there, which we call
Hmm.
night worlds. We're
Yeah.
calling these solar frontiers, and we're going to have a number of individual solar frontiers. Tim is doing space truckers one, which sounds like it's going to be hilariously fun. It's literally Smokey and the Bandit in space.
There's
He's
a video
doing
game
one
called
that's.
Space Truckers that came out about a year ago.
Oh, is there really?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we might have to look into that. We might have to come up with a different title for his or for his
Well,
solar frontier. But
I don't think you'd have that big of an issue because what you're doing and what that game was doing are not going to be compatible.
well, we'll look into it. But he's also going to do a. I think he wants to do a horror, another horror setting. But I think he's looking more into sort of like Lovecraftian horror in space. Um, and then I'm going to be doing a space opera meets cyberpunk type uh, sort of gonzo setting. Um, And Derek and I together, we unlocked at $5,000 when we hit that stretch goal. We unlocked a new Solar Frontier, which Derek and I are working on together. That's going to be post-apocalyptic, and it's going to be this gonzo.
Hmm.
Somebody sends a nuclear bomb back in time to the 1800s, and it collapses time itself, creating this massive post-apocalyptic with holes through space and time that open up in the
There,
Wild West.
there was one concept in a audio drama that I listened to a while back that I think would be interesting to explore, called Continuum
Mm-hmm.
Force, which I guess the best way for me to describe it is, imagine if Doctor Who and Stargate SG-1 had a baby. is the
Okay.
is the best way for me to put it. And one of the primary rules with its time travel is you have a very limited amount of time in whatever time period you've gone into.
Mm-hmm.
If you go past that limit, because of the fact that you're synchronized with that time period, you can't go back.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Um, we have one more. I actually, if you have any fans of the old Palladium games listening, um, I dug Bill Coffin up, which I love that metaphor.
Hmm.
But I've been friends with Bill for quite a long time, and I
Hmm.
kind of convinced him to step back into the ring temporarily to help us out with 13 Parsecs. And he wrote the intro fiction for the game, and he's also doing a mini setting for it.
Hmm.
So Um, I'm not sure exactly what he's doing for his mini setting, but I'm sure it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Now, both Night Shift and Wasted Lands did have a class system, and given that you're tackling given the gamut of genres that you're tackling, are you going to still be using character classes for 13 Parsecs, or do you have something different in mind?
Nope, there are character classes. Um, and some of them are reskins of what you've seen in both Night Shift and uh,
Hmm.
Wasted Lands. There's one or two new ones. We do, for example, have the Psychic. Um, we have. Hang on, I'm going to just open this up here so I can just not be. Give me 1 second here. Um,
Is that 1 second in actual time or restaurant time?
No, it's open now. I'm just scrolling through to find the list of character
Yeah.
classes.
Also,
Um,
I sent
but
you the link
we
for the game I was referencing
yes, I
earlier.
saw that. Yeah, yeah, I saw that. So first of all, we have non-human species in here. So if you have Wasted Lands in the appendices, you saw our rules for playing non-human species like elves and dwarves and
Hmm.
whatnot. We have that here for examples of alien species. Um, of course, they're not comprehensive because again, we don't know what your setting is going to be.
Hmm.
But those include the android or robot, the canis, which is your generic canine species, the Decti, which are a unique, like, bioengineered species that embraces biotechnology. So they have um, body modifications that give them powers and whatnot.
Hmm.
Um, there's the gray alien, your classic gray aliens. Um, there are the Jalex, which are another original species, which are an arthropod species that are very warlike and aggressive. Um, there are the Remoni, who are a silicone-based life form, another original one that we came up with, that have evolved to be bioelectric in nature. And then you have your Saurians, which are totally not the aliens from V at all.
Uh,
Um, and then
for
you
legal purposes,
have
yeah. For legal purposes, yes.
yes, yeah, and then there's a section on how to create new fantasy species, and for that, we give you a sample, which is the Felis, which are a classic like cat person species.
Hmm.
So those are the alien species that we have that you can play. And again, for those who haven't played um, Night Shift or Wasted Lands, the way non-humans work in this is they are essentially a one-level character class that you take right out of the gate, and you have to hit that class's XP threshold before you can take a regular class. So you would start off just as a deck T. And when you
Mm-hmm.
hit their XP threshold, then you would pick your whatever your character class is and move into that to
Mm-hmm.
move forward from there. And then we also have human cultural backgrounds, which work exactly the same way. They're not required. If you want to take, if you want your character to have been an anthropologist before they started traveling in space, you would take an anthropologist or archaeologist background, which gives you special abilities. And again, you have to hit the XP threshold before you can take your normal class. There are guidelines in there where if everybody in the group take either an alien species or a human cultural background, the GM can just kind of call it a wash and say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, since everybody's taking an alien species, go ahead and take a character class, and we're just going to start off that way.
Yeah.
Um, that's just to balance things out, so people don't have to play. If everybody's going that route, you don't have to play through the whole
Mm-hmm.
first level before you get a character class thing.
Yeah.
Um, so some of those are like archaeologist, craftsman, um, uh, desert background. If you grew up on a desert planet, a miner, a colonist, a corporate executive background, a scholar, um, things like that. Space
Mm-hmm.
runner background, which would be like you're the ace pilot and know the space lanes and know how to get under the radar. A transhumanist who is kind of like a human version of that bioengineered species. They've embraced forced evolution through
Mm-hmm.
human augmentation and whatnot. So
Yeah.
you have those. Then the character classes are the augment, which gives you that's your classic character. If you want BioWare cybernetics or even superpowers, you would play an augment. There's the blaster, which is a space gunfighter.
Mm-hmm.
The diplomat, the engineer. And the engineer is the one that people need when things break down or they need you to innovate some technology on the spot. So there's sort of a sci-fi take on a gadgeteer type character. Then you have the hunter soldier, which is your classic like bounty hunter or space marine or what have you. The mystic warrior, which is totally not a Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the psychic, and the slicer. And the slicer is kind of like your space rogue who has the capability to hack into computer systems or hack into high society personally if they need to. They can just kind of slide their way through whatever sort of infiltration they need.
Your
So they're
diplomancer.
your they're infiltrators is what they are.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the basic character classes that we have.
Yeah.
And then like Wasted Lands, there will be an appendix that talks about changing the whole thing over to point buy. If you're not a fan of class and level, you'll be able to change it over to a point buy system.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'd like to play a little bit of word association. I'm going to give a few concepts that have shown up in some form of science fiction, and I'd like you to tell me what would be the closest equivalent to that in 13 parsecs.
Okay.
Now, the first one is from the Cyberpunk games, the Solo. He's usually the one with the biggest dogs, the biggest weapons, and is usually not there to do the subtle approach. He's there to fuck shit up.
That would be the hunter soldier.
All right. All
Or
right.
the augment. Or the augment. Either one could fill that.
Okay. Next would be the rigger in Shadowrun, who is
That would be a
a,
slicer.
that would be a slicer just focused on drones.
Yeah, that's what I would say. It would be a slicer. And again, like an augment is kind of a catch-all. If you have the right powers and the right implants and whatnot, you can fit a lot of those. So you're
Mm-hmm.
going to hear me say or augment a lot, I think, because the augment is a very customizable type character class.
I feel like as an unwritten rule, we should move the augment to the side because it would get redundant for
Possibly,
this.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um.
We can just go assume it's assumed that. Um, and again, I should probably start bringing some of these backgrounds
Mhm.
in here too.
Yeah.
Assuming for human characters. So,
Yeah.
um,
Um.
for this character, I would say it would
Mhm.
probably be a space runner, a slicer space runner.
All right.
Yeah.
Um. The shifting further into Shadowrun again, the
Mhm.
Adept, which, if you're not familiar, Adepts are a type of mage who just focuses their magic inwards so that they
Mystic
can.
warrior.
All right.
It's a mystic warrior. Yeah. Yeah, I
Uh,
do.
oh, hold on a sec. I think there was some
Okay.
cutoff. Oh, there you go. You got cut off for for a split second. I think it's because of all the storms.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, so I just said I do know Shadowrun, so
mm-hmm.
yeah, the adept would definitely be a mystic warrior.
All right. Um, Speaking of Mystic Warriors and them being legally distinct Jedi, would
Hmm.
someone be able to implement something akin to the forms of lightsaber combat within 13 parsecs?
The 13 parsecs is it doesn't detail combat that heavily. Our again, if you've seen Night Shift or you've
Mm-hmm.
seen Wasted Lands, you know our combat systems are very, very heavily abstracted. So um, those sorts of things would probably be you could probably do them if you select the right mystic warriors get like mystical combat powers, and if you took the right powers that would sort of mimic
Mm-hmm.
that. But I think that's more going to fall into your description of your character's fighting style than anything else.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. Um, so next on my particular list would be something akin to I guess a colonist, the space equivalent of a frontiersman.
Hmm. So you could choose just about any character class you want for that, just depending on the type of approach you want to take. But then you would definitely want to take the colonist
Mm-hmm.
background.
Yeah, I mean that obviously that one was a little bit on the nose, but
Yeah.
it's if we're going to be dealing with the possibility of space westerns, then people who would be prospectors or the like would be a
Right.
natural
I would
fit.
say it would be like a colonist background or a miner background or a
Mm-hmm.
craftsman background. And then you'd probably take like a diplomat or engineer
Mm-hmm.
or hunter soldier character, maybe slicer character class. Any
Mm-hmm.
of those combinations would work together
Yeah.
for that type of character.
Now, if somebody wanted to do the whole psychic thing, but focus more on reading and misdirecting minds, more of a Vulcan than a Jedi. Um, I know that there was the psychic class
Hmm.
in Night Shift. Would
It's in 13 parsecs
Yeah.
too, that character class.
Mm-hmm. And it was also in Wasted
Wasted
Lands.
Lands. Yeah. Yeah, because the psychic character class really just carries over across whatever genre you want to play it fit.
Mm-hmm.
So that character class is present in all three games, and that's what you would play, if
Yeah.
and just customize it towards those types of psychic powers.
Mm-hmm. Now, with with that in mind, since I had mentioned the adept, I'd like to go into to the other end of the spectrum and go with the combat mage from Shadowrun,
Mhm.
which is which instead of being about binding spirits and all that is all about blasty casty.
Yeah. So if you're going to do that in 13 parsecs and you want it to be expressly magical,
Mm-hmm.
you will want to cross over 13 parsecs with Wasted Lands or Night Shift because we don't have the magic rules from those games in 13 parsecs because we were leaning away from the fantasy aspects and going more into the sci-fi
Mm-hmm.
aspects of it. You could do that using, again, the augment would allow you to create a character that has blasty
Yeah,
powers. Yeah.
and if somebody wanted to do a full on diplomancer a la a rocker boy from Cyberpunk, what would you suggest for them?
Um, I'm I'm only familiar with Cyberpunk in passing with the game, so give me a little more context on the Rocker Boys or the Diplomancer.
Diplomancer isn't in Cyberpunk per se. That's just a catch-all
Okay.
for character archetypes that are all about social interaction. The social butterfly archetype.
Oh, okay. I mean, we have a diplomat character class.
Hmm. Yeah,
So you would take the diplomat character class, and I mean, depending on what tack you wanted to take with the character, you could always take the corporate
yeah,
executive background as well.
and
And then you've got your high society corporate can talk their way into and out of anything.
yeah. The rocker boy in Cyberpunk is definitely embodying the whole punk rock aesthetic, but they're they're known for for having this massive amount of charisma that they can use to sway large amounts of people.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, again, it would definitely be the diplomat character class what you're
Hmm.
looking at. Um, and I feel like we have some sort of under maybe space runner um, background that would give you more of the scoundrel type
Hmm. I could,
off the top of my head.
yeah,
Yeah.
I could see it. And speaking of that, since you did mention that somebody could use the systems here to do something a little bit more cyberpunk,
Hmm.
that brings me to the concept of doing hacking, which is one of those things that's been very contentious in a lot of games. Largely, some of them because they put too much focus into the hacking system and make it into a duet game.
Hmm.
Uh,
Um, yeah. So we have systems for computer hacking. So we also have a skill system
mm-hmm,
in this. And if you've seen Wasted Lands and even Night Shift, we had the skills in there as options.
mm-hmm,
We've made them in 13 parsecs less optional and more a core part of the system. So you could have just if you want to just keep it really simple, you can just have a computer hacking skill. But we
mm-hmm,
do have rules for computer hacking and cyberjacking. Um, excuse me. Basic computer hacking again is your basic skill class ability or attribute check.
mm-hmm.
It tells you how to come up with the difficulty for the hacker to hack into a system and get the information they need, and then move on from there. Um, then we have rules for how to bypass electronic locks using computer hacking, and then we have advanced hacking rules for hackers in the network, which lets you do things like assuming an avatar in a computer
Mm-hmm.
network and doing battle with you know firewalls and whatnot that may appear as monsters to you or whatever, and you basically build powers in a similar way that the augment would build powers, but your powers represent your computer hacking software, and they're the tools that you have at your disposal while you're in the network to fight your way through AIs, be they passive or deadly or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we keep it from being everybody sitting there and being bored while the hacker does their thing is it takes place in the same combat rounds, as everything else. So basically, if the hacker needs to hack into a building to get you in, and nobody else has anything to do, don't do the advanced hacking rule. Just have them
Mm-hmm.
make their rolls and get in.
Yeah,
If
and
the hacker is trying to break into a system and get information so you can get out while everybody else is fighting with security guards, you're going to roll initiative, and the hacker's going to be doing their thing on their initiative turn in the system while everybody else does their thing on their initiative turn out of the system.
mm-hmm.
And it just keeps things moving and keeps everybody involved with what they're doing.
Yeah,
We figured that's the simplest way to handle it, and it seems to be a way that a lot of not everybody. Again, I'm not going to say we're the only ones to do this, but a lot of games just kind of overlook that really simple solution. Just keep it in the initiative round and keep the game moving. You know.
yeah. A lot of the early purveyors have had it where hacking was this elaborate duet, as I've called it, and the argument that I've often heard is, well, you can always have multiple people do hacking skills,
Hmm.
except the way people set up the adventuring party, people are less inclined to dip into somebody else's archetype.
Right.
That's not
Right.
that is you're not if you've got somebody in the party who's a fighter, you're not going to be as inclined to also be a fighter unless you're being significantly different in your setup.
Right.
Oh, that's not a
Right.
condemnation on anybody's table. That's just how human nature works.
Right. Yeah, it just the way it is. And that's why I think the what you have to do is just make sure everybody has something to do so that they're not just sitting there twiddling their thumbs waiting for the hacker to finish their game within a
Hmm.
game. Everybody's got to have something to do, which is why it's good to have a basic rule so that the hacker doesn't have to make everybody wait while they go through a complicated network just to gain access or hack a system for some information.
Hmm.
But again, if everybody's fighting while the hacker's in the system, you don't want to have the hacker make a roll and then sit there and twiddle their thumbs because they're plugged into the system while everybody's fighting. That's where you bring in your advanced hacking rules and it gets dynamic while everybody's fighting and the hacker's dealing with their thing in the network, and it keeps everybody involved and active and excited. And you have to know when to exchange simple for dynamic.
Hmm. Now, you had also said that this could potentially be used for super's leanings
Yes.
affairs.
Yes.
How would you go about that? Because obviously, doing superheroes in something like this, that's a whole other can of worms, especially regarding superpowers.
We're back to the augment again. Um, the augment is your character. The augment character class, depending on how you skin it, can have bioware, cybernetics, nanotech, or superpowers.
Hmm.
They use the same system. It's in a now in Night Shift and we didn't really do it in Wastelands, but in Night Shift, the inventor character class uses their science points to build gadgets by reskinning spell effects. Obviously, we didn't bring all the spells in. As I said, we didn't bring in magic. So we kind of broke those spell effects down into an effects-based powers system.
Hmm.
So you're going to spend your augment points or power points to build whatever cybernetics or bioware or superpowers your character has. And that's how if you wanted to run a 4-color super game, your augment characters would be your Captain America or the X-Men or Superman or Batman. Well,
Hmm.
Superman's tough. Let's just all agree that Superman's kind of beyond the pale. you know, um,
Yeah,
there's there
whenever
are certain characters like Superman and Doc Savage that aren't meant to be starting player characters.
also if anyone brings up, oh, how would I do Doctor Fate in this? I'd say here's the short answer: you don't.
You don't, right? That's what I'm saying. Superman and Doc Savage. If you want to play Superman, start at 20th level. you know, um,
I'd say
because
if you
that's what
want to
you'll need for the points.
I'd say if you want to play as Superman, you should be playing a different game,
Right,
like say the Immortals Handbook for 3.5 or something. You know, where you
right,
could be
right.
rolling
But
300 d6 or.
right, and I tell people too, it's important to remember that the idea in this is that you're playing as starting heroes who are still finding their way as heroes. So you might not start off as um, you might not start off as Cyclops as you see him in the X-Men now, but you might start off as Scott Summers on the day he gets admitted into Professor Xavier's school.
You're
You know,
you're not the Justice League. You're year one Titans.
right? Exactly. And eventually, as you adventure, you might grow up to become, you know, bigger heroes. But yeah,
Well,
so the augment, but
Cyborg's
our
part of the
other
Justice
character
League,
classes, I
so.
should say, our other character classes, like all the character classes, are designed to balance together.
Hmm.
So you can run a 4-color superhero game, and if you want to play Punisher, you wouldn't play him as an augment. You would play him as a hunter soldier.
Hmm.
Next to the augments who have their superpowers, or the psychics who have their psychic abilities, or what have you. So you can still mix and match, but the character classes as they sit can be skinned to play a supers game, whether
Yeah,
it's street level or 4-color or what have you.
and I know there's a reason why this is the case, but when I look at the numerous RPGs that have been based around Alien over the years, even if one of them I will never run again unless I'm getting paid, that being the one that came out in the 90s. Oh, I think there is a. I feel like there's been a massive missed opportunity in the fact that we have not had a TTRPG based on the Predator, or at least had the Predator make some sort of presence. Which
And I have to be honest, Predator has never been my favorite franchise, and I always thought it was weird that it gets smashed together with Alien because the two are so wildly different.
if it weren't
To
for how
me, they
well the
never.
comic worked, then they wouldn't be smashed together.
Everybody says that. Yeah, everybody says that, and it may be right. I honestly have never read the comics, and I
Hmm.
know that's blasphemy in some circles. But I am a comic book fan. I just have never read those specific comics.
There's also been some of
But
the games, but one of them
that
was done by
said,
Rebellion, who knows what they're doing.
there are floating around on the web. A
Hmm.
bunch of people have done Predators for the Free League Alien RPG, and they're
Hmm.
really, really, really well done.
Hmm.
Now they're not official, but
Obviously, I
they
think
fit it. They
it's
fit in very well, and they're very, very well done. So I would say hunt those down if
yeah.
you're a fan of Free League's Alien RPG. The
Hmm.
Predators are out there on the net.
Yeah. I think the reason it hasn't been done officially is because of a bunch of rights hell that's
Hmm.
gone down. But
Yeah, licensing.
the but would some obviously the big thing that came out of the crossover comic was the actual name of the predators, the Yatuja.
The
Uh,
Yacha, yeah,
yeah.
Yatwa, Yatuja, whatever you
Hmm.
pronounce it. Yeah.
This is the reason why it's important to give a pronunciation guide for your sci-fi settings, people.
Yes.
But with with the system that you have with 13 parsecs, would that fall under a hunter soldier?
The Predators.
Yes.
I would definitely. I mean, they would. You would have the Yatwa, however you pronounce it, alien species that you would have to work up, and then most of their character classes would most of them would probably be the hunter soldier character class.
Hmm.
Some might be blasters. Um, I assume that they've got engineers in their culture. So you could find reasons to have various character classes, but I would say the archetypal predator, yeah, would be a Yachua hunter soldier.
Hmm. Now, I always bring that kind of thing up because you one would think after all the years of colonial marines and the like dealing with xenomorphs that some sort of unit that specialized in hunting them never came to be. And it's possible that one came to be in either one of the novels or one of the comics.
Hmm.
I don't have enough alcohol in me to look that up. But it's a concept that's stuck in the back of my head for the longest time since even in the real world we have certain types of hunters for specific types of animals or specific
Hmm.
types of environments, whether it be whether it be in Australia, whether it be in parts of Africa. I mean, you had a professional hunter on the set of Jurassic Park, even if you got eaten by raptors.
Right.
So the
Well, then in Jurassic World too, you have Owen, who is very specialized.
yeah.
Former soldier, and then he turned into an animal trainer specialized in training velociraptors, and
Hmm.
um, so yeah, you have that character in there as well.
Yeah. Now, a lot of science fiction tends, especially ones that are combat leaning, I won't say focused,
Hmm.
have had particular weapons that are either custom variants of stock weapons or weapons that have some degree of a cool factor to them. Obviously, yes, the lightsaber is one example of this, but another would be the smart gun in Aliens.
Hmm.
So, would you have in 13 parsecs a way for weapons to be customized?
I mean, a lot of that, again, we get back to our combat system being very, very abstracted.
Hmm.
Um, all weapons, for example, do 1d6 by their
Hmm.
default. The idea being that any weapon is equally deadly in the hands of a trained user.
Hmm.
Um, so a lot of that is going to be flavor based when you want to customize your weapon. That said, in our equipment chapter, we do have examples like the plasma sword and um, the pulse rifle and the um, plasma guns and laser guns, and we have those specific things. I would say that the best way to have a truly unique type of weapon or piece of equipment again is to do it with powers, um,
All,
because you can build.
all right. So I'll bite on that. So using powers, how would one build, say, the smart gun?
Well, the smart gun, really, I think that's just a robotic sentry weapon. It just is. That would be something that you set up and say we have these defensive weapons that we can set up to watch our perimeter, and there's really nothing special about them except that they have AI. So you could just add a couple points of computers to them from the Starship rules if you
Mm-hmm.
wanted to model something like that, to represent their artificial intelligence, and then they're basically just machine guns. Other than that, um,
All right. So given that each weapon is going to be doing D6, um,
now we do have optional
mhm.
rules for, because some people get really bent out of shape about the idea of all weapons doing 1d6 damage. So we do have optional variable damage rules, along with weapon class rules if you really want to get crazy. Um, but yeah, the default is that weapons do 1d6, and you might have certain class abilities or certain larger weapons that you might tell you to roll 3d6 and keep the best of the three.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which gives you a better chance of rolling a 6. And then there's, if you roll a natural 20, you get to roll an extra d6 and keep it and add it. And if it rolls a d6, it explodes from there. So there's ways to do more damage. But yeah, the default damage code for the weapon is it's usually going to end up doing 1d6 damage. Explosives do multiple d6 totaled to an area of effect.
Mm-hmm. Now, with all of that in mind, I'm guessing there's been plenty of conversion materials in both Night Shift and in Wasted Lands.
Mm-hmm.
Within 13 parsecs, do you have plans on putting in a appendix to convert material as far as advice to convert material? Let me clarify, from Night Shift or from Wasted Lands into 13 parsecs if someone wanted to.
We're going to have the same types of appendices for going to, changing your dice mechanic to, straight d20 or straight percentile or dice pool, or all that stuff is going to be in there. We'll probably discuss that a little bit, but really you don't need much in the way of guidelines because the three games literally use all the same rules. So you can drop stuff from Wasted Lands. If you want to have an Elvish Imperium out in space in your 13 parsecs games, just bring in the elf
Mm-hmm.
species from Wasted Lands. It drops right in with no conversions necessary whatsoever.
Yeah.
If you want to have spellcasters, you would just bring in the sorcerer from Wasted Lands, drop it in with the spells from Wasted Lands, and no conversions are necessary. So you don't really need guidelines for bringing those two games in. And in fact, we have pledge levels in the backer kit campaign right now where you can buy. We have a science fantasy spectacular where you'll get 13 parsecs and Wasted Lands. We have a No One Hears You Scream level where you'll get 13 parsecs and Night Shift. And we have an Into the Wormhole where you can just get all of the core games together in one package.
All right, I can certainly get that. So, with that in mind, what are you shooting for as far as a page count?
Probably going to be about the same length as Night Shift. That's what we're hoping. It might run a little bit longer. So that will be, let me double check, roughly 288 pages. It might stretch to 304, maybe. It depends on how long the um, mini settings go. You're not going to see as big of a bestiary in this simply because, like you talked about at the beginning, sci-fi is so huge that it would be almost impossible to cover everything everybody expects from monsters in a sci-fi game. So we'll have some of the more iconic features. Certainly, we'll have examples of all the PC races or PC species as monster stat blocks for you to use, and maybe a few others in there. So the monster section will be thinner than it is in Night Shift or Wasted Lands, but that's kind of out of necessity. And I feel like people will, once they get the hang of it, they'll very quickly build their own alien species for their own settings.
Mm-hmm.
So that buys us a little bit more page count, but it depends on how. It's going to depend on how long, because the mini settings are being worked on right now. So it depends on how long those get. But yeah, the short answer, which I've just babbled on way too long about, is between 288 and 304.
All right.
And please, if you can hear that, ignore my cat wailing in the background.
I didn't even hear it.
Okay. He sounds like he's in horrible pain, and he's not. He's just being a drama queen.
But as far as a release window, what would you be planning for?
September. Yeah,
September.
and it's worth mentioning that um, all of our crowdfunding campaigns so far have delivered on time or early. Wasted Lands delivered a month early.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to promise that we're going to go out early, but it's worth mentioning that you're not going to sit and wait for a year and a half for your game from our company. It's gonna deliver on time.
I feel like I made a remark last time about under promising and over delivering.
Yeah, that's the key.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Scotty when Scotty always tells Captain Kirk he needs 12 hours, but he can get it done in 2.
This is why I always ask whether when somebody's giving me a time frame, if that's an actual time or restaurant time. Because how many times have you
Yeah,
heard it'll be 5 minutes for a table? It's never 5 minutes.
right.
You're sitting there for like
So,
30 or so minutes before that ridiculous beeper that looks like an overcomplicated coaster goes off. But but I do look forward to seeing how it develops. And with that
yeah,
said,
I'm really really excited for people to get their eyes on it.
mm-hmm.
We really like. So right now we took a different approach for this one, and we funded it as a soft cover book.
Mm-hmm.
If we hit 7,000 is all we need to hit, and we're only a little over 1,400 away from that, with 17 days left. If we hit 7,000, it's going to be hardcover, and I will also open up a pledge level for people to pledge for leathers.
Mm-hmm.
If we hit that, so it's very doable, but we need the eyes on it, and we need people to get in there and back it, and it's already funded, so you're getting the book. So
Yeah, I can certainly get behind that. But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my temple and enjoy the madness that happens here.
no, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around
Awesome.
here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged. And of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.